afternoon, good evening, no matter where you are in the world. This is your boy JJ right here on JJ's PC Builds. Oh, looks like I got something I gotta take off the screen. There we go. I forgot to do that because of the live stream. No matter which way you look at it, you're still seeing it the same day. But today we're going to take and do a recap. And I mean recap. We're going to recap on the fact can, and get this. Can AMD drivers kill a graphics card? Okay. Well, I'm just going to sum this up a little bit. Kris made a video that said there's between, and I'm not calling nobody out, and don't get me wrong. He made a video stating that, he had 40 to 60 bad cards. So the thing is, oh my God, now I got to shut this. That's what y'all were saying. Y'all could have told me, close the window. But he says he got like simultaneously 40 to 60 bad cards, right? So that was on his one video, but he just made a recent video saying that he's tested quite a few cards and he come up with a good conclusion of what the problem could be. So we're going to dive right into it and we're going to show you what he has to say. So, and this is not a call out, but this is and when we watch this, we'll go through it, and then at the end, I'll give you my conclusion. But you have to watch it from beginning to end. And if this is your first time here, make sure you subscribe. Because when we do live videos and stuff like that, and you want to chat with us in the chats, you have to subscribe. We kind of changing things up, so in order for you to, want to be a part of the JJPC Builds family, it's best that you subscribe. So, because we got a lot of things cooking, but anyway, that's not the point of this video. The point of this video is, can graphics card drivers kill graphics cards? And that's the angle of it. So let's go ahead and go right to the video. Alright, I went and pulled up his video. This is his most recent one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let the audio roll. And I'll be right here along with you all, so that way you all can see that, it is being talked about. So let's go ahead and dive right into the video and see what we see.
This is very strange, because in our tests we have noticed that everything stays the same. As I said, the BIOS stays the same, the firmwares in the controllers are staying the same, and nothing can change them. So the driver cannot change these firmwares.
Now, I want you to hear that very carefully. He said the driver cannot change the firmware. That means it cannot change the BIOS software, the firmware that's built into the BIOS of the GPU. So understand that. The only thing that can change the BIOS is you. You're the only one that can change the BIOS on a graphics card. Okay, when you get it from the factory, it does not factory change itself. And the driver software for your graphics card cannot change the firmware. Only you manually can change the firmware. Unless you get malware, then that's a different story, because then you're pretty much skewed. But anyway, let's get back to it.
And why this happens? Why we have so many cars looking like this one here? And I started last week to contact the customers again one by one and ask more questions. And the first question that I asked was, why you are sending the card to me? The card has warranty sticker, the card was sealed. So almost all the cards were sealed. Let's start from there. From 48 cards, Founders Edition cards are 43. 43 Founders Edition cards from 48 cards. And almost all of them were sealed. So I don't know the exact number because when I get a card here, I don't look at the seal. I just open the card and start working. And the question, why is this card here and not for a warranty repair? Answer, from a lot of people, I don't have invoice for the card. And it turns out that, so I contact all 48 customers, but not every single one answered me. Around 25 people give me an answer, and from those 25 people, only 2 people have invoice for the cards and their original owner.
Now, I want you all to really think about that. He gets 48 cards from 48 different people. Now, and he gets 2 of them that get back to him and tell him they got invoices, but he's got the rest of them that don't have invoices. Now, I want you to think very carefully about that. Why don't they have invoices? Well, you know what? If you got it off of eBay, you'll never have an invoice. You have to take and download it. So, or take a screenshot of it, and then there is your invoice. And that's one bad thing about eBay, is because the seller never puts in a receipt. So you can't really prove where you got the card from. All you can say is, I got the card. So let's get moving on in the video.
Of the card. One of those customers with the invoice, he takes me one more email the next day.
We're gonna
in the basement, and there is 2 coal can break from the temperatures there. And my first thought was, no, I don't think it's possible. And after that,
see, the thing is, the reason why I went forward in the video a little bit, because they were talking about the temperatures. Basically, that some of them had the cards stored down in their basement, and they were thinking of, the cold wetness, the kind of stuff that would kill a card. If you stuck your TV down in a cold basement and you go down there every day to warm it up, guess what? That condensation and evaporation soon is going to kill the TV. But they're having their computer down in the basement, so they were thinking that the evaporation and condensation on the card killed the card because of that. Well, no, not necessarily. That ain't going to kill the card, but it can start a factor of minor corrosion, over time, over a period of time. But let's get back to the video.
I starting to chat with the different people, so the owners of the other cards, and I just noticed something, that because they don't have invoice and they are not using the warranty service, the next question was, from where you have the card and for how long time you have the card. Most common answer, I just bought the card. This is the funny part here, and everything is starting to be clear in my head, and I will explain now to you.
See, this is where he's coming up on that conclusion of where the card came from. I mean, what was so obvious to me was, if you have many people, and this is what made it so obvious to me, to know it's not software, to know it's not firmware, and to know it was a hardware issue, was this. And, we're going to get down to that. But how I knew it was a hardware issue, One, the fan curve was off. Okay, usually if your fan curve was off, that's usually firmware, and that's usually your firmware being altered on the fan curve to make the card run at a steady speed. I have two cards, I have one card in my other PC that's like that. It was they altered it somehow to where the fan curve runs at higher temperatures instead of lower temperatures, which is the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life. And if I ever get a chance to fix that, I'm going to fix that fan curve, or I'm going to be able or find out exactly what they did. So I'll have to dig into that card later on to see if I can take and reverse engineer what they tried to reverse engineer. But that'll come, if I go to do that, then it'll come to another video. But let's get on with this video and see the outcome of it, and then I can give you my overall thoughts.
It turns out that almost all the cards are bought in first week in December or last days in November last year, and all the cards are looking in very good condition. I will show you. As you saw in the last video, I show you the cooler as well. This card is not clean, so I personally I didn't clean the card, and the card was sealed. The card is looking very clean, like the previous one and like many more. And when the customer says I bought the card from internet and the card was working, so the cards were working with the customers for a couple of days. Some cards died in the first day, or there are cards that were running for 3 days, and after that happens this. But it looks like that those cards are coming from the same place. This is my theory. You don't have to believe me, but this is my theory, and I will tell you what I think.
See, now that's the thing too. I want to show you all something. I'm gonna dig over here. I'm gonna dig over here into my pile of misfits. Now, the reason why I'm saying this is because he makes perfect sense. Now, I'm gonna take and blow up the screen really quick, and then we can come back to this. I want you all to see this. You see this card right here? You see this right here? This right here is an abomination. This right here is an AMD Fire Pro W5400. Okay, this is an old ATI technology bought off of AMD. Okay, now it seems that Barco refurbished this card. Oops, sorry. Barco refurbished this card, okay, and put their own BIOS controller in here. Okay, they changed this card by altering the BIOS controller. Okay, so what they did is they put their own firmware on it. Okay, and the only way you could flash this card, to put the right BIOS on it, is if you take their BIOS controller off and replace it with the AMD controller that's supposed to be on here, and then you could put the correct BIOS back on this, and this card will go off to the races. But not necessarily with this card, because when you mess with the card, okay, you're at risk of burning up the SoCs, the controller chips, the voltage controller chips, and many other chips. Even the GPU die, you can screw it up. Okay, now why I'm telling you this is this. what happened with those cards is astronomically correct, and this is the problem that's going on eBay right now. So we're going to get through the video and then go to the conclusion of the end. Let's just get back to it and see what the finale is.
I think that some crypto miner, because nowadays, so right now the crypto mining is not so popular, and a lot of people with a lot of cards, they stopped mining months ago, and I think that those cards, so the cards they have are just in some warehouses or some like a storage place. And
Bingo.
the question is, if those cards were from the same person, so the same seller sold all these cards in internet in end of November and the first days of December, the question is where those cards were stored, because it's very important, the temperature, the room temperature and air humidity. This is very important. When we are buying, for example, chips from Taiwan or China, and I'm always booking the fastest shipping to Germany. It took around 2 to 3 days. The first thing what I do with the chips, it doesn't matter what kind of chips, RAM chips, chipsets and so on, the first thing is to dry the chips. I'm placing the chips at 80 degrees for 24 hours. If you try to solder a soaked chip which was exposed to very high air humidity, if you solder this chip, it will pop like this one here. I have experienced this many times. What we have here and what I think is going on, we have the same coolers, same PCBs, and most important, all the coolers are cleaned, which is not normal for end user card. On end user cards, they are not always dirty, but they have some dust on them. Here we have nothing, they're like new. The GPU chips are damaged on the same way, and my theory is the follows. Those cards are probably bought, most of the cards are bought from the same person, and most of the cards are coming from the same place. Those cards are not stored properly, those cards are soaked. If you buy a card like this one, you plug it in, you play something, the temperatures on the GPU die are going high, 80 to 100 degrees, and they will pop, just like this one and all the others. Let's talk about what is possible and what is impossible. The driver cannot do damage like this one here. The driver cannot flush your BIOS chip, the driver cannot flush your controllers. So they are staying the same, and the driver cannot make changes there. It's impossible.
See, just like he's saying right there, it is impossible. And which I know that for a fact for doing this many years. I know it's impossible for the driver to alter the chip. The only way it can alter the chip, the BIOS chip, as if it was flashed. Now, if you had some kind of malware program that did a flash on your video BIOS and you get some kind of flicker in the middle of a game or something, and your screen cuts off and goes back on, and and you picked up some kind of malware or something, boom, then that would be the only thing that could ever alter your BIOS is malware. Okay? And that's it. Unless you alter it yourself, you can't flash firmware onto your graphics card unless you use some kind of installer. But from what he's saying is that it is impossible for a driver to screw up, and I say this as I'm knowing it, it will not mess up the video card. I've taken and ran all these drivers this driver software from AMD, where everybody's claiming the 22.11.2 all the way up to the 23.1.1. There is a problem. There is not a problem. Okay, that's all in y'all's head. Okay, you're making something out of, and I'm gonna be honest with you, and don't take this wrong. You're making something out of something that's nothing. You're looking for it to be wrong. You're looking to push a blame on a company that's not in the wrong about this. And and this is going to be my conclusion, because you can go watch his video, fully through, so you can I'll even leave the link in the description below. You know what? We're just going to do that and put the conclusion right here. Okay? We're just going to put the conclusion right here, because this has already got me upset. I got people that are sitting there telling me, well, this could do it, and that can do it, and this can do it. You can tell me many things can do it. Okay, just because I don't, this is one of the reasons why I run integrated graphics. This is why I run integrated graphics, is one, because you go to eBay, you buy some bogus crap card, and then you go to plug it in your system. One, let me give you another hint. One, if you're buying it from overseas, 9 out of 10 chances you can pick up a virus just by firmware. Okay, somebody does a firmware update on a video card, and they turn around and they put a bug in it. Boom. Your whole computer just goes up in smoke. I kind of feel like a butthead. I was sitting there talking to you guys. I did like maybe 10, 15 minutes of what my conclusion was with this whole thing. And I forgot to hit the pause button. I had you guys on pause so I can take and flip things around a little bit, but I should have left it going. That way you would have known that I was sitting there talking to you. Okay, I got to the point where I was upset, and I just stopped the video. I'll leave you a link in the description below. You could go watch the whole video. Okay. I'm gonna say this: when you leave your comments, make sure you watch his whole video, Kris Fix's whole video first, before you comment in the comment down below. And then you can draw your own conclusions. But this is my conclusion of this whole mess. He concluded that it wasn't drivers, which I agreed on. He concluded that the whole mess of overheating, which could be a possibility, but it's not firmware, which that is true, because factory set firmware is different than you reflashing your own BIOS or rewriting the BIOS and putting it onto that card, causing, different effects. The only problem that I have with a lot of these cards right now is the fan curve. That's the problem I got with most of these new video cards, is the fan curve. Okay? You can't adjust, it's like the one that's in my other computer, the NVIDIA card that I got in my computer. You cannot for the life of me adjust the fan curve. It is like factory locked. And you can't even change, you can't move it up, you can't move, you can't move it up, down, you can't move it to the side, you can't do it to the side, you can't do nothing with the fan curve. So in order to change the fan curve on that card, I would have to unplug it from the graphics card and plug it into the motherboard in order to control the fan curve. Which, that is the craziest thing to do. But if I have to unplug that card from the graphics card and plug it into the motherboard to get a better fan curve, then you know what? I have to do what I have to do. I'll just buy the parts to make a plug-in and plug that fan directly into the motherboard fan curve. So that way, it's under full control from the motherboard. So you don't have to worry about that. That's an option. You can do that. It's an option, but know what the pinouts are. Know what color goes where, and your hot, your ground. Make sure the fan is 12 volts and not 5 volts. Make sure you get the right voltage, and amperage is not going to be too much as long as it's not pulling over 4 amps. Then you'll be fine. But if it's a 5 volt fan that's on your video card and you got a 12 volt socket, don't use it. You need some fans are 5 volts, some fans are 12 volts. And if you got a 12 volt socket and a 5 volt fan, you can take and go online and buy the 12 volt fans and replace it with the 12 volt fan and then plug it into your motherboard. So that's another option too. It's always good to have an extra set of fans. Or you can take and just strap on. You can take out the fan that's on the video card, strap on a bigger fan, onto the heat sink, which I've seen a lot of people do. They'll take and they'll tie strap a bigger fan, like an 80 millimeter fan, to the heat sink. Or a 40 or a 50 or a 60 millimeter or whatever size fan they put on there. That's up to them. Or they'll take and they'll buy another heat sink, and repurpose it and put a dual fan heat sink on there, and change the aspect of the video card, by putting a bigger heat sink on it. You can do that too. Just make sure you use the right thermal paste, and you have the where the thermal pads are supposed to be on the ice, on the chips, the controller chips and stuff like that. Make sure all the pads are in the right place, so that way when it fits together, make sure that make sure your video card's going to match up with the heat sink. So if you want to run dual fans on that PCB, then that's another way to go. Run a dual fan system, a bigger heat sink, and you'll be better to go off. But this, like I said, down to the last bit of this conclusion, is it's not the driver software, because it can't alter. Driver software can only change the display. It only controls the display and the graphics drivers. Okay, but as far as the hardware control to software, see, that's where the BIOS comes in. It goes from hardware to software. It's just like your motherboard or your computer. You have a BIOS, and that controls that's like a go-between the hardware and the software. So, but the thing is it's locked. It's locked firmware, so you can't alter it. Even with even with your standard drivers from like AMD and stuff, it can't alter the VBIOS. Unless there's some kind of program that's built into the driver software that can take and reflash the BIOS, which card manufacturers are not going to do that anyway. They're not going to flash your BIOS right in the middle of upgrading your drivers. Y'all know that, because if that was the case, then your BIOS would be flashed directly from the factory, and then boom, you wouldn't have to ever touch, bias flashing ever again. Which you shouldn't do it unless you know what you're doing. So, but like I said, the conclusion is it's not the driver software, it's not the firmware. The cards came from miners. It was a set batch of cards from miner. Some cards that were sitting in a warehouse that they picked up from miners, and they sat. So when everybody bought that batch, that batch was bought from one set of miners. So basically, that was the outcome. Mining cards. And they were overheated, but they decided they can clean them up, and guess what? They cleaned them up nicely to make them look brand new, and then they sent it out and said this card was new. So when you're shopping on eBay, and they say the card is brand new, make sure you have your nose out and you do all your checks and balances. Because if they say the card's new, ask them the question, has this card been mined on? And if they give you some BS excuse, don't buy it. Because then you're buying a bad card, and you have that right to ask the seller. You have that right on eBay to ask the seller if the card has been mined on. And make sure you all use that fashion. You ask them that question. If they can't come up front, and say it right on the web page that it's been mined with, then, and if they can't give you a specific answer, and they can't tell you about the care of the card or anything else, okay, shopping on eBay is buy at your own risk. It's not, where the seller's looking out for the buyer to make, to where they can make more profit. If they're honest with the buyers, the sellers are, but the sellers wonder why they get scrutinized. Okay, they get scrutinized because they don't put the right information in there, and then they have all the excuses in the world. I bought from eBay before, but I bought from a company that sells on eBay. I'm not buying from individual sellers because they don't know how to be forthright and honest about what they're selling. It's like me trying to tell everybody, hey, buy this card right here. It works. It works. It works. Which I know is a lie. Okay? That's what Barcode did when they sold this card in that Dell Optiplex that I told you guys, the 790. This card worked for 2 whole days. 2 whole days. And then the only thing that I did was I tried to update the drivers, and the card went blank. That's because this is an altered BIOS. This card has an altered BIOS. If I were to put the actual AMD BIOS chip back on here, this card would probably come back to life. So, when you buy from eBay, you definitely watch what you buy. I bought that as a combo. So, in order for me to fix my problem, I just went and got me a $50 video card. Another $50 video card off of eBay, which did work, but nobody's going to sit there and alter 1 gig of VRAM cards. They're not going to sit there and play around and alter the BIOS and everything else just for that. And they're sure not going to mine on the 1 gigabyte cards because they'd be way too slow. So I know it wasn't mined on. That's how you know. Anything that's below 4 gigs, below 4 gigabytes is 9 out of 10 chances not going to be a miner's card. Anything above that, because the more memory they got, the more, the more VRAM they got, the more they can mine with it, and the better results they get. So they need those high-end VRAM cards. So think about when you buy, be very careful, use rule of thumb, always ask the question, did they mine on it? See my thumb? Ask the seller, did you mine with it? Is this a refurbished card from a different seller? How long have you been using this card? That's another key point. When did you first buy the card? You can ask them, pinpointing questions, and that way you can get an answer. Okay? But if you just go and say, okay, well, and you just go and buy the card and you don't ask the questions, you buy at your own risk. Okay? It's not going to be AMD's fault that you bought a card off of eBay that was mined on. That's not AMD's fault. Okay? It's just like you doing it with NVIDIA. You're buying an NVIDIA card on eBay and then turn around, the GPU die crashes and just goes kaput, then you blame NVIDIA for the same problem. Or, you buy a card off of eBay and turn around that the connector starts blowing up, and you bought it from eBay. You don't know who you're buying from eBay. Okay? When I buy on eBay, I contact the seller. And I ask the seller questions. And if the seller can't give me the answers, I'll say, have a nice day. And then I move on to another seller that, that sounds like they can be trusted. And then you build what they call a relationship between the seller and the buyer. Okay? I'm not saying you got to sleep with the seller. I'm saying you got to at least get to know the seller a little bit, to what they're selling and what their purpose is, and if this is going to be a continuous thing, if they're going to be doing this for years or not, stuff like that. I mean, I'd rather try to get my hands, get my hand in hand with a seller that's going to be, honest. When they purchase the cards from somebody else, at least if they get the information from them and then they turn around and resell it to you, at least you can ask them about the same information. If they can't give you any information, they don't know and stuff like that, like, okay, my hands are washed. I'm not gonna buy the card. But anyway, that's the answer. The cards were mined on. Has nothing to do with the software, but I'm going to conclude it right here. If this is your first time here, make sure you like and subscribe and watch the videos from beginning to end. We're still trying to get the channel monetized. We're still working for 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 watch hours. Watch all the videos from beginning to end. It would help the channel out tremendously. But on that note, and I want to say welcome to all the new subscribers that we have got in the last day or two. I see that we went up 2 or 3 more subscribers. Welcome to the JJ's PC Builds family. But until the next time in the next video, this is JJ, your boy. We will see you on the next one.